switch me on.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Proton Pack. It's not a toy. My name is Matt, and this is episode 6 of the Venkman conversion, where I'm taking my Proton Pack and changing up some of the details of it to make it look more like what we see on the Ghostbusters 2 version of the Venkman Hero Pack. And this episode is going to focus on taking off the splitless loom that I currently have that runs between my thrower and the pack and replacing it with a more accurate split loom. I got 10 feet of 3/4 inch split loom for like $10 at AutoZone, which was cheaper than I could find it at a hardware store like Lowe's or Home Depot. So I snagged that. I've got some electric tape on the Ghostbusters 2 versions of the Hero Packs. They did have a lot of tape that would run along the length of the split loom to keep it closed up so that the wires and cables didn't come out. More so than what they had in Ghostbusters 1. And I've gone through, and one thing that I'm going to show you on this is how often or how far along the length of the loom we need to put the electric tape to make it accurate to how often the tape is on the actual pack. I've actually gone through and counted the ribs, and I'm going to be using those as my measurements to put the electric tape where it needs to be. But before I get into any of that, I need to take off the loom from the thrower. More than just attaching the loom to the motherboard today, I'm actually going to be drilling a few holes in the motherboard and one here in the thrower. There is a braided kind of cable or wire that, when you look at the reference photos of the Venkman Hero, and you can also see it on the Spengler Hero, that cable is anchored on either end of the thrower and the pack and runs through the length of the split loom. So that is one detail that I don't see a lot in people's builds that I want to add to mine. But what I'm doing right now is taking the bottom plate off of my thrower so that I can unplug the electronics board inside the thrower and then be able to pull out the current loom that I have in there without causing any problems. Another thing I need to do is clip off this zip tie that I have. I put that on there to make it more accurate to specifically what we see at the end of Ghostbusters on the rooftop. You can really see these zip ties when they're walking up to face Gozer. And so last year I did add a couple of zip ties there when this was more geared to being a Spengler inspired pack. I do have my electronics board velcroed to the side. So in cases like this, I can kind of move things and put it right back where I had it. There it goes. That's all it needed, was a little push. And I have successfully removed that cable. So as you can see, when we talk about splitless or split loom, splitless does not have any kind of seam in it. I cut the seam here so that it would actually fit into the thrower handle. But for the rest of the length of it, there is no split. If you look at the new one that I got, you can separate it because it's intended to be closed up. but being able to access the inside of it beyond just one end or the other. The advantage of having the splitless one is it doesn't have this crinkling sound. So that's one of the benefits that I've enjoyed from having this particular loom on my pack. But I'm going back to this one as I originally had on my first pack, just for the accuracy level of it. So next thing I'm going to do is take out the electronics cable. As you might be able to see here, I do have a clear plastic tube that runs through parts of my splitless loom, and I had that on there just to kind of give it a little bit of more stability, and when it curls at the handle or when it curls up at the bottom where it goes into the pack, I found that it would bunch up too much and too tight and start creasing on itself. And so I wanted to put something inside of it to give it a little bit more heft, a little bit more stability, like I said. Haven't decided yet if I'm going to do that with the new split loom or if you'll even need it. Trying to find where it is. There it is. Only got about that far to go. There we go. So, just that simple, right? So there is my cable that connects the electronics boards between my pack and my thrower. And I just needed to get that out so I can first drill a hole. First hole I'm going to drill today is actually going to be here on the handle of my thrower. And this is where this little braided cable or wire is going to be anchored at the top. There's a tiny little hole if you look at the reference photos, and this has this little braided cable that folds over and is clamped down just on the inside of the split loom, and that runs the whole length of the split loom and then is clamped down on the opposite end down here on the motherboard. And then there's also two holes that I'm going to drill down here as well for a zip tie that you can also see in the reference photos that runs, I'm assuming, goes around the end of the split loom there on the inside of the pack. One thing that I'm going to do a little bit differently from what we do see in the reference photos, I don't like the look of the loom ending right here at the end of the handle, and the same thing at the end of the entry hole there on the pack. I like to have it run a little bit further in on either end, just because I hate that look of where it doesn't continue all the way in. So what I'm going to do for mine that's different from the actual pack for this step is to actually run it quite a ways into the handle and again into the pack. All right, there you can see the hole that I drilled. And then here's the end of the cable. Let's test fit. It does fit through there as I was hoping. So that's step one. Complete. Drilled hole. Just going to move that out of the way for now. I am done with the thrower for the moment. Now the next thing I'm going to do while I have this same drill bit, I'm using a 3/32 drill bit, and the braided cable that I'm using is, or wire, whatever you want to call it, is a 1/16. I really didn't have a way other than eyeballing of guessing how much or how big that cable was, or the wire. So like I said, I just kind of eyeballed it, picked what looked right to me. I got 5 feet of it for like 50 cents per foot. And then I bought some little clamps that will go on there to clamp it down when I get to that step. So got the one hole drilled. The second one is going right here. This is the entry point for where the loom comes in. This is the width of the cosmetic plate, and then roughly this is the width of the hole where the loom comes through, and then right in the center of that is where I am going to drill this hole. Almost all the way through. There it goes. All right. Grab that cable again, just confirm it does fit through the hole. Now I'm going to be swapping out my drill bit for the 3/16 that I was using in the last video. And this is the size that I'm going to use to drill for the hole, actually 2 holes for the zip tie that runs through there that we can see in the reference pictures. Again, I really didn't have a good way of measuring this one out, so I didn't go to the lengths that I did, like on the rivets and writing the number 1 on the side. This was more eyeballing, and this is something I'm comfortable with, so this is what I'm going for. So I went roughly an inch in from the cosmetic plate from the edge of the motherboard, and then about an inch from each other, and that looked about right to me. And I'm thinking this is going to be about the right size that I need to drill out. It might need to be a little bit bigger. We'll find out once I'm able to run the zip tie through there. So here goes nothing. Okay. So I have more metal to get rid of, which will be fun. Did a lot of cleanup after that last episode. So there's the holes. You can see in the reference photos, it does look like there's a third hole, or at least the start of a third hole in that area. That's one thing I'm not going to put yet. But it does look like this will be just about the right size for this. Look at that. Perfect. So I'm not going to clamp it down yet, but I'm going to go ahead and run that through. And then once I do have the split loom in place, I can clamp the other side over around it. The thing about the split loom is I don't know exactly how much I'm going to end up with because of the way that I'm going to measure it. So I'm just going to start off with the hole 10-foot roll and anchor it down where I have planned to anchor it. And then kind of work from there. And as I put the tape on it, as I run it into or get close to running it into the wand, then I'll make my cuts and be able to know exactly how much I ended up with. This is Dorman brand 3/4 inch by 10-foot split loom. The 3/4 inch is the measurement of the interior diameter, so it does come out to be about 1 inch exterior diameter. So like I said, I have a mounting hole right here, and that's where I plan pretty much to start. But I also want to make sure that the split is running right pretty much over where the hole is for this cable that I'm going to run through it, because I want the gap to be in that neighborhood so that when it's facing flat down against the motherboard, that gap is there that's going to let the cable run through and connect without me having to drill another hole or poke a hole through the loom itself. I have my Alice frame over here. I'm just going to borrow one of these bolts. So poke a hole in it there with the scissors. Give it a little bit more, going this way and this way. There we go. So, like I said, that's going to be my entry point from the other side, and it's going to anchor it down through that hole. There. And then I do have a pretty large wing nut for each of these that I use to kind of clamp it down. So I can twist it that way, and then the braided wire can go through its hole right there. And then the electronics wire can escape through the hole there. So I'm good with that. Okay, so I have the cable that goes to the electronics boards going through the length of the split loom. I decided not to include the clear tubing that I had on there, just because it was not working out for me. It was a little bit too thick and just wasn't going to close all the way. Even though I am going to tape it up with the electric tape, it was still going to show through just because it was a little bit too thick. If I do decide that I do need something like that, I can always open this up and go get a similar length at a smaller diameter and run it in there. This braided wire runs through super easy, and this is where my electronics board end is. So it's going to hang out there with that guy. And for now, I'm going to tape them off, painter's tape, just so I know where they are with respect to the rest of the loom. So, all right. So there you can see I do have quite a bit left over on this end, but that's because it does connect up here where I currently have the board situated when my pack has everything still in it. The next thing I'm going to do is take these cable clamps or stop set that I bought for the wire, and use that to clamp off this end. So what I need to do is I need to run it through here first. I'll stab myself with it. So it goes in there pretty easily. Let's see how easily it goes through the second time. It wants to. There we go. All right, so I'm going to try to bring that in pretty tight. As I was trying to crimp this thing down and not having any success, I remembered looking at the reference photos and it looked like there was some, it looked like electric tape. It may not have been on this little connector. So I put some on mine to keep it from sliding down. And that seems like that's going to do the trick to keep it where I want it to be. Then that can still be absorbed into the loom. Like that. The next thing I'm going to do is put my shell back on top of the motherboard just for a moment, just to get a good idea of where tape number 1 needs to go. I don't know how many times around they went. Just going to kind of trial and error it. If it needs more, I can always put more on there. One thing I did notice is that in the pictures you can still really see the ribs pretty well in the tape. So I am going to try to make sure that those do still kind of pop out. So there's number 1. At that point, I can take the shell back off. This is where I need to consult my list because I have all of the measurements listed, again, based on how many ribs they go down. So I'm going to count them and put the tape on there, and then we'll see where we get when we get to the handle. Okay, so I'm finished with that portion. I might go back in and retape a few places because you can see the stuff inside is trying to peek out, and I may not have folded the loom good enough to hide it, but I do have the correct length in between on the ribs. This is for the Venkman. This is not consistent across the board for all of the other packs. This is only for the Venkman, so don't think that you can do the Spengler or anything else and think that they'll be spaced out the same way. So that's one thing I want to put out there. But there's 7 pieces of tape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Starting with the first, between the first and the second, there's 25 ribs or thereabout. Between 2 and 3, there's 47. Between 3 and 4, there is 37. Between 4 and 5, there's 50. Between 5 and 6, there's 39. And between 6 and 7, there are 36 ribs. Again, the way I'm going to do mine, I'm not going to cut it here. It says 12 ribs between 7 and the handle, and then it just kind of opens up. I don't like that look, and so I'm going to have mine go beyond where it would normally go, or it does on the real pack. I marked off where the 12 ribs would be from the top of the 7th piece of tape. This represents the edge of where it would be cut on the actual Venkman Hero. Like I said on mine, I'm going to extend the loom into the handle. So I marked this so I can have a point of reference for where the braided wire needs to end up. I already got it in there. So what I'm going to do is tighten this down and then tape it off like I did the other one so that I get a nice tight little loop there on the end. Okay, now that I've got that in place, I'm going to cut this zip tie, and then I'm going to replace it with another one to go back with the zip tie like I had before. So thread the other end of the cable back down the loom. There. So this is where I need to cut my split loom at some point. Probably going to have it where it just goes most of the way through the handle. Let's just go for right about there. In a random spot. Trying not to cut through my electronics cable. That's trimmed. This needs to go in first. All right, it's in there. Push some of this back through. And the nice thing about having a split loom is I can pull out the slack one section at a time. All right, light back in the hole. Pulling out some slack. All right, I think everything looks happy on the inside there. There we go. I can put as much slack as I need to into the pack. And I'm about done. So there is the threaded cable on the top. And I will slide some of this other stuff back in there. If I need to maybe work on the tape a little bit more, I can, but I've already got them marked off where I want them. I will put the bottom back on the thrower, but as for now, after this long video, I've finally replaced the split loom, splitless loom with split loom, and hopefully it'll be a success once I get everything buckled up and back together. Next videos, I do still have plans to do the Alice frame, but I do have some other things that I might be able to update here in the near future. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to put this one little zip tie back around the handle. I don't have the exact right kind of zip ties, but I just like having the look of it on there. So we got the threaded cable on the top, and then the zip tie that hooks into the smaller zip tie that runs around the bottom. I'll trim off the excess right there, and we're going to call it done. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't watched any of the other ones, check them out. They're not as long as this one. Again, I apologize for stretching it out so far, but it's quite a process, especially with drilling new holes and adding that extra cable on there. But the split loom does add that level of accuracy that I was wanting for my pack, and does match up with the Venkman Hero Pack. If you are curious on how much length that I actually do have, basically from this end to this end, I measured it before I started this portion of the video, and I did get about 39 to 40 inches. So that's about the amount that you would see from entry point to entry point on the thrower and the pack itself. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.